I'm here. Okay, I'm not late at all for this at all. It is June 2024. God damn it. I am many months late to making this video, huh?
I always come back.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucas, and welcome back to another BABBLIN ABOUT. Now, I know it's been a long time since I've done one of these. This is one that was kind of mandatory for me to do, because this is the BABBLIN ABOUT on the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, released on October 27th, 2023 last year. And yeah, I'm very late to getting to this. I'm sure you could tell. If you're a longtime viewer, you probably already know this by now, but if you're a new viewer, it's no argument that Five Nights at Freddy's is a big pull for this channel, and for me as well. It really has been a personal source of joy and creative drive for me over the past few years. So that begs the question. I'm filming this in June of 2024, and the movie came out in October of 2023. Lucas, what the hell took you so long to make a BABBLIN about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie? I mean, for God's sake, your first BABBLIN about anything was for the trailer. What took so long? I didn't know how to talk about it, okay? Look, okay, when analyzing something like this and trying to actually critique it, I always try and be fair. You know, I try and mention the things I liked about it as a fan, and then also mention the things that kind of stuck out to me that I was like, that could have been a little better. So to my surprise, after seeing the movie 5 times, I was still unable to do that and not ignore my own biases about it. I'm breaking character a little bit here, in the sense that anytime I tried to talk to someone about the movie who hadn't seen the movie yet, who was asking me a recommendation, me, the FNAF guy, it was tough. It really was tough for me to do that. That's why it's taken so long for me to finally do this video. And what's frustrating about all this, you know, this is pretty normal. This is a pretty normal thing to go see something and just enjoy it and have a good time. But you know, the internet is all like, no, everything has to be perfect. Every piece of artwork has to be amazing. And it's so annoying because you gotta play like 4D chess with your criticisms. You know, if there's just one thing off about your opinion of the film, it's like, actually that take was wrong. What are you, some kind of freak in nature who just casually enjoys a movie? What is wrong with you, you goddamn troglodyte? I can't help that I felt jovial bliss finally seeing Freddy Fazbear's big stupid head and his big silly nose on screen, okay? It's the 10-year anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's. I've sat on this video for way too long. So you know what? The best way to actually go about this, let's just babble about it. Let's just talk about the history a little bit of this movie, because let's be honest here, it's had a rocky start. To me, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie was like kind of a white whale in the sense of like, it was announced to be a thing like almost a year after the initial game came out in 2014. And mind you, production did start in 2015 via Warner Brothers and was supposed to be directed by Gil Kenan. And as history showed, there was multiple production issues which caused Kenan to step down from the film, and the film was eventually transferred over to Jason Blum's Blumhouse Productions. This was kind of a big deal, as Blumhouse Productions produced multiple horror movies, well-known horror movies prior to this, Paranormal Activity, and even the 2018 Halloween reboot trilogy. Now under Blumhouse, Chris Columbus was chosen to co-write and direct the movie, and he's done multiple notable movies in the past, such as Home Alone, the initial Harry Potter movies, as well as he wrote for Gremlins. I am including that because I am a big fan of Gremlins. However, Columbus would also end up leaving the film, and in October of 2022, we would find our next and final director, Emma Tammi. Emma, along with Seth Cuddeback and Scott Cawthon, do I need to explain who Scott Cawthon is? He made the dang games. Would work together to co-write the screenplay of the final film we all know now. And as I said before, the Five Nights at Freddy's movie released on October 27th, 2023, in a very interesting way. The movie had a simultaneous theatrical and streaming run on Peacock, which I found very bold for them to do that. But honestly, it paid off in their favor. While the movie wasn't critically received well, which to be fair, I think it was kind of insane to think the big critics are going to give a shit about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. Being honest here. With a budget of $20 million, the film was a commercial smash hit, grossing $297 million and making it Blumhouse's biggest opening worldwide. And for a movie that's been in production hell for so long that even I thought was just never gonna come out, that's insane it still did as well as it did. So I think it's only fair to start by just actually talking about the overall plot of the film, because that was kind of something I was curious about myself. How do you adapt something like the first Five Nights at Freddy's into a feature-length film? And I think for the final film, they did a pretty cool job doing that. Some things to talk about, but I think overall pretty solid job. We learn about Mike Schmidt, a man down on his luck who is haunted by the loss of his brother Garrett, who was kidnapped right before his very eyes as a child. Mike is inarguably having trouble moving on from this, using lucid dreaming to relive that day to find some kind of clue in that memory on who took Garrett. I think lucid dreaming is the term here. If it's not, my bad, but you get what I'm saying here. And on top of this, Mike is struggling to keep a stable job and keep custody of his sister Abby from social services, and specifically their Aunt Jane. And now that he lost his most recent gig as a mall security guard for assaulting a father thinking he was kidnapping a child, Mike's fate is now up to his career counselor, Steve Raglan. Who isn't William Afton, I swear. I swear to God it's not William Afton, the man who killed the kids in the video games, I promise. You gotta believe me here. Steve Raglan offers Mike one final job, a security gig at the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Mike just has to do one simple thing. Stay there overnight and make sure no one gets in and messes with the building or the beloved animatronics, Freddy Fazbear, Bonnie, Chica, and Foxy the Pirate. Oh, and also make sure the place is nice and clean and tidy.
That's two things.
Alright, you listen here right now. So you heard it right. Mike has to spend 5 nights at Freddy's.
He said it! He said it!
And he does so by sleeping half the time, which, to be fair, I gotta be honest, he was real with that one. I would prefer to sleep on my job too, but, you know, that don't really get the donuts. But while he's sleeping, he's continuing to dream. However, it's different now. There are 5 additional kids in his memory that were never there in the first place. Ooh. These nights begin to have many twists and turns. I left scotch tape here. Whoops, my bad. But after this, the nights begin to have many twists and turns. From Vanessa Shelley, a police officer who also mysteriously has been watching over Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and we were never told about that by Steve Raglan, to a group of vandals hired by Aunt Jane to trash the place to set Mike up, only to one by one be killed by each member of the animatronic band, to even Abby joining in on the main plot, having to go with Mike to his shift, and ends up befriending the animatronics and they end up building a fort together. I'm gonna say it even though I don't need to say it, I was not anticipating seeing the main characters and the animatronics build a fort together, but here we are. On his final night, Mike has one more dream with these kids who we find out are kids who were killed in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and they simply want one thing. In exchange for Abby, Mike can be with Garrett once again. However, Mike realizes that's not what he wants. He just wants to move on from this. He just wants to make sure his sister is safe. Those ghost kids won't take no for an answer, and they try and kill Mike by strapping him into some kind of torture device. I think its name is, its like official name is Torture Freddy. Mike somehow manages to escape with the help of Vanessa. Vanessa reveals that there were kids killed in the 80s, and the bodies were never found. They were in the animatronics the whole time. And she knows this because she's the daughter of the man behind the slaughter, William Afton. And she has been reluctantly and out of fear working with him to keep his crimes under wrap and make sure no one ever finds out what happens at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, as well as this allows William Afton to keep killing under complete secrecy. But the question remained, where is William Afton now? Don't worry, we find out as he takes the entire scene, armored up in the yellow rabbit costume the kids mentioned throughout the film, is William Afton. And when he takes off the mask, we see who he really is. Steve Raglan, Mike's career counselor. Sorry, what? No way. I like that I'm being sarcastic about this when I actually saw the film for the first time. I marked the hell out, even though I knew already Matthew Lillard was William Afton, and this is for later. This is not for right now. Not only do we find out that Afton played Mike this whole time, we learned that Afton knew who Mike was, because he killed Garrett. And after a pretty one-sided fight with Afton and Mike, Afton ends up stabbing Vanessa. It's actually Abby who comes in and saves the day and reminds the kids that this is the man that killed them. And thanks to Mr. Cupcake of all things, Afton's suit experiences a spring lock failure, trapping him and slowly killing him inside his suit that he used to take so many lives. Mike and Abby help Vanessa out of the building. Meanwhile, the animatronics are dragging a dying William Afton into the back to be forgotten about. And hopefully this gave those kids the closure they needed, and their spirits can move on. For right now, at least. So that's an abridged telling of the story of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie, and I felt like that was important to do for this one specifically, because Five Nights at Freddy's story is so vague, and it honestly at this point to me, personally, is so unsolvable that you kind of just have to accept some things. And it's okay if you want to try and solve and put everything together, but to me, that's how I have the most fun with the Five Nights at Freddy's games, is I try and just solve it the best I can, you know? And that's one of my points of praise for it, is that the story is pretty simple, yeah? Anyone can really go into this movie and watch and be like, oh hey, I got what happened here, I understand what's going on. And I think that was necessary for this movie to work. People needed to understand what was happening. We couldn't just go immediately into stuff like Remnant and Agony. It just wouldn't work. I thought it would have been really funny if they did that, but it's obviously they were not going to do that. So after watching the movie multiple times, and based on my whole spiel at the beginning of this video, what did I think of the Five Nights at Freddy's movie as both an established fan and just as a moviegoer? As I said before, I really appreciate that they went kind of fairly simple with the story. However, I felt like that was a double-edged sword to it as well, because yes, it was a pretty simple story, but at the same time, it was a pretty simple story. I can't say this movie isn't unpredictable. It's pretty predictable at times, but I don't think that's bad. I know that's a common criticism, that it's like, oh, just because it's predictable, it's bad. I think if the movie is engaging and fun enough, it doesn't really matter. And to me, the film was engaging enough and fun enough that I was able to look past those. But I can't help but feel like, yeah, the script is very bare bones. It's very like point A to point B to point C, which is fine. And you know, that means it's organized. It's fine. That's good. But maybe just a little more would have been nice, you know, a little more intrigue or something. I think for the most part, the cast is pretty darn good. I think to me, the standouts were Josh Hutcherson as Mike, Piper Rubino as Abby, and of course, Matthew Lillard as William Afton. Despite him not being in the movie for too long, I think in all of his scenes, both when he's Steve Raglan and William Afton, I think he takes the scene pretty darn well. I mean, and I expected that. It's Matthew Lillard. I expected that. And like I said, I really wasn't exaggerating when I say, when he enters the scene in the Spring Bonnie suit, even though I knew what that meant, it was still just such a moment in the theater of just like, holy, here we go, you know, kind of thing. It was nice. It was fun. I thought Elizabeth Lail was great as Vanessa, too, and even some of the side cast I really enjoyed it. Specifically, Kat Connor Sterling as Max, who was Abby's babysitter. Christopher Stokes as Hank, who was just one of the vandals who breaks into the building, was just an absolute joy on screen. I mean, like, him running away, screaming at the top of his lungs, that was hilarious. Which I would love to see them again, but unfortunately, they're kinda...
Was that the bite of 87?
Dead. They're very dead. They're 100% dead. And of course, how could I not shout out Michael P. Sullivan as Doug? We fucking stand Doug here. If you do not like Doug, get out of my video, but leave a like while you're at it. Please, thank you. I really would appreciate it if you liked the video, too. I did, however, feel that there were a few line reads every now and then that were just either not really read to the fullest they could have been. I think Aunt Jane is, like, comically evil in this movie, which, to me, is funny, but, like, at the same time, it's like I couldn't really buy Aunt Jane as a real person. Her actress did great. It's just the actual writing of the character, I felt like she should have been a little more in-depth. All the kids, of course, do great in their roles, too. It's really like, I thought the cast was pretty solid overall. I think everyone did pretty well with what they were given. The next thing I want to talk about, and to me it's probably the biggest praise point of this film, it's set design and the actual work put into the animatronics. I jokingly said it in the trailer video that FNAF is real now. That is, to me, the strongest aspect of this movie, is that that set is so well done. It is so believable, and I just absolutely 10 out of 10 with the set work. Any scene in Freddy Fazbear Pizza visually was great and interesting to look at. And don't even get me started on the animatronics. Apparently, there were two variants made for Freddy, Bonnie, and Chico. One was a wearable one where there were suit actors. The others were just straight up animatronics. And for Foxy, I believe he was a mix of, there was an animatronic and a puppet as well. And apparently there was a story where the Foxy animatronic's arm lit up on fire, and that's funny. Wait. Hey, wait a second! Grim Foxy confirmed for the second movie? I'm excited to see how much better they get at it in the next one, too. I highly recommend you check out the behind-the-scenes stuff posted by multiple YouTubers online that kind of go into the set, because it's really interesting how they designed the set to be one-to-one, but also be practical for filmmaking as well. It's very interesting, and I highly recommend you check it out. I do want to talk about the cinematography for a little bit, because while I thought everything in Freddy's looked great, I can't help but feel the cinematography of the film is very average. There's not really anything bad to say. You know, it's not like I noticed a glaring lighting issue or like you see the shadow of something. It's not anything like that, but I feel like they could have went a little more experimental with their lighting at some times. Because I feel like at times the lighting is pretty standard horror affair lighting and nothing really too crazy, you know? Cinematography is really important, and it can even help establish a style to a film. And while I do think this film has its own unique style, I think it just needs a little more in the cinematography area to really excel it. Now, a common thing I've seen about this movie in interviews and even posts Scott has made himself on the internet is that this movie was made for fans first and foremost. And I need to be honest here, I don't love that rhetoric for a lot of stuff. I feel like, yes, something can be made for fans, but there's a thin line between making it for fans and making it just fan service for fans. Does that make sense? Does that make sense what I'm saying there? And this is where it's a little hard for me. Because as a fan, as a longtime fan since 2014, yeah, this movie was made for people like me. There's so many small things in this movie that general audiences would not catch. You know, you got your obvious ones like Matt Pat in the diner, Corey Kenshin as the taxi driver, but then there were some real cuts in there. For example, Mike's whole thing is that he's going into his dreams and trying to relive memories. And what book is he reading at the beginning of the movie? Bam! Dream theory. Why is that a thing? Because that was a long-running theory for a long time of the story of Five Nights at Freddy's Post 4. A lot of people didn't like it. I was indifferent towards it. I remember laughing really hard when it was hard focused, like the camera is hard focused on the title Dream Theory. It's very intentional what they did there. There's callbacks left and right. Chica's magic rainbow from FNAF World. There's another Springlock suit of Ella from the books. And to me, the biggest one, and it is such a if you know kind of thing, there's a scene where Max is going into the back room and we see another suit in the back room of a dog animatronic. And why that's a big deal is that is 100%, and it's confirmed by the way, a reference to the first ever hoax in Five Nights at Freddy's when the first game came out of Sparky the dog. I am not exaggerating to you, when I saw that, I audibly went, is that Sparky the f***ing dog? Like, that to me is a sign of something made for fans. So yes, I firmly believe that their focus was focusing on the already established fans like me, first and foremost. I mean, like, for something like this, you gotta do something like that. Let's be real here. I never felt that took away from the movie at all, though. I felt like I still enjoyed the movie that was there, and the people who went with me on my multiple screenings, who some were established fans, some have never seen the series in their whole life, agreed with me on that. I think there was genuinely a good balance between fan stuff and just making a decent movie. So now there was a question I have been asked multiple times about the FNAF movie for an obvious reason. Five Nights at Freddy's is a horror series at its heart, and the question I was asked every time, Lucas, did you find the Five Nights at Freddy's movie scary? This is a very critical conversation topic that I feel like might alienate people. Look, Five Nights at Freddy's to me is a franchise that, for me at least, I don't find too scary anymore. Mind you, the franchise, I have to acknowledge, has changed. It has changed since Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria Simulator. And I think that's okay. I think it's okay for it to change. I do wish the series has stayed more in line with its horror roots. Because I like horror. I was a kid growing up where I never wanted to watch horror movies. However, I would always keep peeking into the box a little bit. You know what I'm saying here? Get what I'm saying at? I don't know if this has been coined anywhere, but I'm going to just say what I feel about it. Five Nights at Freddy's to me is horror light now, if that makes sense. That's akin to something like Goosebumps is what I'm kind of getting at here, whereas Goosebumps was horror made for a younger audience, which could serve as a gateway to have this younger audience, as they get older, get into more advanced horror. And why I say that specifically is, that's what happened with me. I was just joking about before how I would always kind of peek into horror stuff. I'd be like, oh no, I'm too scared. Goosebumps was something that was kind of my bridge to that. I loved Goosebumps growing up as a kid. I loved watching that show. Honestly, as an adult now, even though that show has not aged gracefully, I still really love that original Goosebumps show. It was what helped me get into horror. It was what helped me understand horror, that it's like, yes, it's scary, but it's fun. It's supposed to be fun. when I'm asked if I find Five Nights at Freddy's that scary anymore, honestly, the answer I usually come to is no. I just think it's a really cool series now that I really enjoy. There's some scares every now and then that'll still get me every now and then, but it's not as scary as when I initially played the first game, but I think that's normal. When you've played a series that has had so many installments at this point, you kind of just get used to it. There's a positive and negative to that. You gotta understand, I'm used to the horror that Five Nights at Freddy's brings, at least in its current state. I hope that makes sense. So when I was asked the question multiple times, Lucas, did you find the Five Nights at Freddy's movie scary? Unfortunately, this is probably my biggest critique of the movie in the sense that, no, I didn't really find it that scary. I was kind of talking about before cinematography and how important that is. That is especially important to horror. It is one of the backbones of horror. Cinematography and sound design are like two of the biggest things to horror for me. And I just feel like because there were no risks taken with their cinematography, the actual horror aspects of the cinematography at times were pretty basic, you know, casting a shadow onto a wall and that. And that's fun. But when it's a series like this, that it's a horror established franchise, it is disappointing to see that the movie really isn't that scary to me. Again, fear tolerance is different between people. Going back to my experience, I saw this movie with people who are really bad with horror movies, who even they were like hiding behind their popcorn at some scenes. But then I had people who came with me who were horror veterans who kind of had the same feelings that I have here. Horror is very subjective to people, and that is something I want to get across with the Five Nights at Freddy's movie specifically. I personally didn't find this movie that scary. That's okay. And if someone did find this movie scary, maybe they were a little younger than me, or maybe even they were older than me, that's okay too. Horror, that's what's so fun about horror. I like horror because it's such a very malleable genre, and that's what makes it fun, you know. But I would be lying to myself if I didn't say I was disappointed in that aspect of this movie, and that is my biggest disappointment from the movie. While I made it very clear at this point that I really loved this movie and I had a good time watching it, to say I wasn't disappointed in the horror aspects of it would be a lie. Mind you, it's really hard for me to find something like Five Nights at Freddy's scary anymore, but I'm really hoping in the sequel, they're really promising that that's the biggest critique point they took from this movie, and they're really going to work on that. Now, the other glaring thing about this is, this was a PG-13 horror movie. That isn't really an excuse, because I think PG-13 can work in horror. And I don't think this movie needed blood and guts to be scarier. I never have agreed with that sentiment for the movie because that's never what the franchise was. Gore was always very limited in the franchise. The goriest thing was honestly Springtrap, and even then it's very hidden. It's very like you have to look at it to really see it. You're never in your face like, no, eyeballs are popping out. And okay, that's not the best example considering the game over screen is literally eyeballs popping out of the Freddy Fazbear suit. Not the best example, but you know what I'm saying here. I've never agreed that FNAF has to be a gory franchise, and in my defense, Scott Cawthon kind of has said the same thing about his franchise, so I think considering FNAF horror light is the perfect term for it right now. So to bring it all home, as someone who is a fan of horror and a fan of Five Nights at Freddy's, who doesn't really get too spooked by Five Nights at Freddy's anymore, no, I unfortunately did not think this movie was that scary, and that was disappointing to me. And I'm hoping for the sequel they really fine-tune that and find that balance of making something scary but also making it accessible, because it's possible. It totally is possible. Have you read any of those Fazbear Fright books or the Tales from the Pizzaplex books? There are some visuals in those books that are visceral and gnarly and could totally adapt into PG-13 format. Now we're kind of reaching the end of this video, and the last thing I want to talk about is probably the most self-indulgent part of this video. I want to talk about my experience. So going all the way back to the 8 Years at Freddy's live stream event I did, I kind of jokingly said I would consider renting out a theater for these movies, and then streams following, I would kind of continue talking about that, joking about it. I did it. I 100% did it. It ended up being in my price range to rent out a theater opening night. And it was, the reason why I ended up doing it was because conceptually with that, it was thank you. It was thank you to my friends who have stuck with me following this franchise, all the memories we've made together, and all the days that were brighter because they were just excited to hear me talk about it. It's very rare that I feel like that, and I wanted to pay that back a little bit with people I care about, you know. And it was a great day. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of photos because I was kind of just enjoying the day. Here's a photo of me outside a Hot Topic that had a big poster. And I'm saying that specifically because that is one of the aspects that made the day so interesting and fun. This was everywhere. There was so much advertising for this movie, from outside of a Hot Topic to in the shopping center the movie theater was at. And just seeing the marquee of the showtime say Five Nights at Freddy's, it was surreal. It was strange. I loved every second of it. I was in a getup. My getup was inspired by the employee costumes in universe of the movie. And I wasn't the only one in costumes, you know. I saw there was someone in a security guard outfit. There was someone dressed up as the puppet. There were even, you know, it was nice to see younger fans have like their plushies and everything, because that was me when I was younger, you know. Like, I would go to like a movie I was looking forward to, and I had like a toy of like something relevant, like Transformers. I had my Optimus Prime helmet or something, you know. It was just a nice night, you know. It was a nice night at Freddy's, I guess you could say. It weirdly enough, and this is very strange to say, and this is probably one of the most self-indulgent things I'm gonna say, this mass-released movie, considering all of its history of both the franchise, the production, seeing this movie actually come out, it felt like an event. It felt like an actual event, even though it was just a movie released to every movie theater. It was on streaming too. I could have just stayed home, but no. I go to the theater for the stuff I like. It felt special, especially for me, who's been following the series since 2014. It felt special and unreal. And to me, what brought all of that home, and there's one thing I left out specifically, what brought all that home to me was when the movie ended, the credits rolled, and Five Nights at Freddy's by the Living Tombstone kicked in. I could not believe they actually got them for the credits music, which apparently was set in stone for years. they had the deal for a while. And that, to me, brought everything home. I was so happy to hear that song as the credits music, because I didn't think they would do it. I really didn't think they would put that song into the movie. It made me so happy for the Living Tombstone, and it made me so happy that I like this series. So I want to wrap this video up now, because I've been going on for a while. This video, honestly, I think this video has been kind of a mess. It's been kind of hard to make this video. So what do I feel about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie? I try my best to be fair when scoring stuff. And as a movie overall, I personally feel the Five Nights at Freddy's movie is about a 7. It's good. It's fun. It has some pretty noticeable flaws too. But as a fan who has waited for this movie for so long, I can't rank it. I just had fun. I just was happy watching this movie come to fruition. And quite frankly, that was the outcome I wanted. My expectations were set perfectly. I didn't think this movie was going to be this magic lore-solving film. I didn't think this was going to be an Oscar award-winning film. I just simply expected this to be the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. And I think it is. It has its weird quirks, like the fort scene, which just feels so out of place for a horror movie. But that's also Scott's humor. That's been the humor of these games. I believed it. I was able to get along with it. I was able to see that this was this fort scene that I didn't even acknowledge until now. I forgot to bring it up. It's a very weird scene in this movie where we're seeing the characters bond with what are supposed to be the antagonists. And in any other horror movie, that would not have worked. It works in the Five Nights at Freddy's movie because these are kids and they're finally having a day where they can just simply be kids and have fun. And that is my takeaway, is that I simply had a day where I could see this movie I was looking forward to, multiple times even, and just have fun. I didn't have to think about the criticisms because it never mattered to me. It mattered to me that the Five Nights at Freddy's movie exists. It was real. I literally have the 4K right here. It was a real movie that existed. And while it's got some warts, the memories and the joy I had seeing it will always shine through that. Alright, I guess that's the end of the video now. I'm done. I'm done talking about the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I have finally done it. Is this gonna stay? Is this gonna stay? Nope. There we go. I've finally done it. I've done a BABBLIN About on the Five Nights at Freddy's movie. I'm probably forgetting something, but understand BABBLIN About has never been a strictly review show. It is simply me babbling about something. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Hopefully I can do another BABBLIN About soon. Happy 10-year anniversary, Five Nights at Freddy's. I'm looking forward to the sequel, which is, for someone who has had weird coincidences with this franchise aligning with aspects of my life, the sequel's release date is currently slated for December 5th, 2025. December 5th is my birthday. How does this keep happening? Thank you guys so much for watching. Happy 10-year anniversary, Five Nights at Freddy's. And until next time.